Welcome to the American Diversity Report podcasts, where we hear from change makers and diverse innovators. Today, as your host, Deborah Levine, and editor of the American Diversity Report, I'm delighted to share with you part of our Black-Jewish dialogue. And for this event, we have two very special people for you to hear from. So let me share with you and introduce them to you. Marilyn Khaled recently served 2 terms as Knoxville Poet Laureate. She has published 18 books, including How Our Bodies Learned, The Love That Moves Me, and Packing Light, new and selected poems with Black Widows Press. She translated Paul Eluard's last love poems and Benjamin Perret's The Big Game. Dr. Khaled is Professor Emerita at the University of Tennessee, and she has mentored poetry groups for the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts in Olar, France. Maria James Theo is a poet, performer, and an educator from Central Pennsylvania. She has written 3 poetry collections, and her poetry has been published by Cutthroat Journal of the Arts, Love Your Rebellion, and other journals. Her choreo poem, Reclaiming My Time, an American Griot project, debuted in Somerdale, Pennsylvania in 2018 to 6 sold-out audiences. She won the Art of Protest Poetry Prize from Penn State for works from that production. In 2020, she created a Zoom version entitled RMT 2.0, and this performance poet attended Marilyn Khaled's workshops in France. She is now the program coordinator of creative writing for the Capital Area School for the Arts in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Cool. Welcome to you both, and if I have mispronounced your names, please correct me.
You did good. Thank you. You did great.
It's so wonderful to have poets on this program. We have had poetry on the American Diversity Report since its inception 15 years ago in honor of my father, who taught poetry years ago and kept his poems with him during World War II battles. So how did you guys get started in this beautiful artistic endeavor? Marilyn, why don't you share with us your story first?
Well, I'm going to start with the point where I really fell in love with poetry, which was at Tufts when I was an undergraduate. I had the best poetry teachers on the planet. I had Maxine Kumin and X.J. Kennedy, who still communicates with me. They were kind. They were nurturing. They just, you could do nothing. If you wanted criticism, you had to go to the office and ask for it. So one time I did that. I went to X.J. Kennedy's office and said, what do you really think of this? And my last name then was Zimmerman. And he said, it's a zombie, Zimsy. But there were tensions in my house, all kinds of tensions, mother and father, and north and south, my mother from Montgomery, father from Brooklyn. And so the poetry was a refuge. It was a place where I could order things and have some control, at least for the space of the page. And I got a lot of encouragement. And it was a place to be myself, to have a voice. So that was really the beginning at Tufts. Now they're going to see this and ask me for money, aren't they?
Maybe.
I'm happy to do it.
Thank you for that. Maria, what? Maria, tell us a little bit about how you got involved in poetry. You're muted, so we'll need to have you.
There she is. No, can't hear you. You're beautiful though. Get a click on the little mic thing. So you unmute. There you go. Try that.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you go.
Here you go.
Great. Sorry about that. I was saying my father was a poet and a civil rights activist, and he used to I used to see him writing with his big yellow pad and just and he would share his poems and friends came over. And so I wanted to know what that was. That was how was he making these words so important to so many people. And so I decided before I knew how to write that I was going to write poetry. And once I learned how to write, I started when I was in first grade. We wrote little books and things, and I didn't stop until I was an adolescent and had an attitude problem. And then we moved to Pennsylvania from Washington State, and that was kind of traumatic for me. So I started again. And I realized even after I didn't go to school for it at first, I went for communications because I did like to write, but poetry, where's the money in that? So when I was in my first job and quite bored as a content writer for a website, I thought to myself, well, who is it that I really admire professionally? Who do I really admire? Nikki Giovanni, Maya Angelou, Rita Dove. What do? They write poetry and they teach. So that's when I started the path of
We lost you.
sorry, that is a problem with
Well, while she works on it, Marilyn, how about you tell us who is it that was your icon? Who inspired you?
Well, so many people that it's hard to, and it changes over time, but I, and it keeps changing. When I turned 50, I decided I would give myself a gift of going out to the community of writers in California. And I had Robert Hass and Sharon Olds and Marie Howe and Yusef Kumanyaka as teachers. And I was 50 years old. I mean, I was born again in poetry, okay? It rocked my world, and I remember sitting down with Galway Cannell, rest in peace, and I showed him a little poem that I had written that day. And again, this was one of those situations where you had to ask for criticism if you wanted it. And I said, well, what do you really think? And he said, anyone could have written that. You need to put more of yourself in it. And I was like, I almost passed out. Then I went home and I thought, okay, let's see what that's like. Let's see what it's like to put more of myself in it. And that was at age 50.
Wow.
Yeah.
Goodness.
a bright, full future ahead. Make that moment.
Yes. Well, maybe we all get better with age and practice and input, feedback.
Yeah.
It changes, it grows us. We never cease to evolve, right?
From your mouth to God's ear. That's right.
For those of you who don't know the saying, from your mouth to God's ears, it is an old sort of Yiddish saying from the Jewish community that I grew up with also. And we are always going to be part of that childhood. And the words just sometimes just bubble up. So tell us, Marilyn, a little bit more about your Jewish background and what that was like.
So my mother and father, they didn't have a lot in common when they met. They had their Jewishness in common. She was being from the South and he from Brooklyn. Their Jewishness in common, that was something they both felt very strongly about. And their sexual passion, but that's a different show. And so that was something that they clung to. I mean, if you were Southern in Montgomery, it was a small community, but a very coherent and lively community. They clung to that. And I found that to be true also in Knoxville. When I first came to Knoxville in '81, there was a billboard outside of town in South Knoxville that said, "Jesus is Lord of Knoxville." And I saw that. I was new in town. I was like, oh my God, where does that leave me, So I went over to Temple Bethel. I think I went over that day and said, and there were some elderly women there having some tea. And I said, well, this is what I saw, Jesus. And Sarah Saccharin, who's rest in peace, she said, "Oi, for this, he could have it. Jesus is Lord of Knoxville, he could have it." He made me laugh so hard that I thought, okay, that's the sense of humor, the camaraderie there. That I landed on my feet, and I've loved being part of the Jewish community here in Knoxville.
How long have you been there again?
81.
Since '81.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you, Maria, a little bit more about the civil rights background and where you grew up.
I started out in Washington State, but my parents were from the East Coast. So they had moved when I actually started out in New Jersey. And when I was a baby, they moved to Seattle. So that's where we were, but my parents were both civil rights activists. And at that time, like when I was little, I was born in '74. So I thought they were talking about long, long ago, but but I definitely, heard the stories, the things that they had been through, got to know some of the people that they knew, and really became enamored with the '60s and the things that my family went through, and just history in general. So that was really important to me. And then when I was a teenager, we moved to Pennsylvania, and I have been here ever since. And my parents are back as well. So we live close to each other, and that's great. And their stories have contributed immensely and inspired a lot of my work.
I bet they have, of course. And as somebody who was actually in civil rights marches in the '60s myself.
Mm-hmm.
You too.
You too. It just seems like yesterday sometimes, doesn't it? And there's certain familiarity here that means that the artistry coming out of that history, whether it's one that we saw in person or is inspired others, is really needed these days. Goodness, yes. So in both cases, you are teachers, are you not? And you teach writing, poetry. What's it like?
Who goes first?
Well, I'm thrilled. My mentor is Marilyn. I have to say, when we were in Ovalar, I was already a professor, but I was teaching communications mostly, and occasionally I would get the creative writing class. Yeah. And when I went to Ovalar the first time in 2011, I was like, Marilyn, I'm in heaven. I am in heaven. Surrounded by PhDs, we understand each other. We're just swimming in poetry, because poetry is everywhere in Ovalar, and we're drinking wine. This is wonderful. I was just so happy.
Not a small part.
And Marilyn's like, this is the life, isn't it? And I was like, it is. So I would say that's when I started formulating the exit strategy from general education to creative writing. That's what I wanted to do.
That's lovely. Yeah.
Well, Marilyn, that's quite a story, isn't it?
Beautiful. No, I love it. You know, this little village in Southwest France, it is exquisite, and there's really nothing that's not poetry there. So we've been very lucky to have that gig together. Teaching creative writing, you know, here at the University of Tennessee, I had some of the finest writers I've ever worked with. I mean, undergraduates and graduate students, and I'm still in touch with a lot of them. The graduate students in particular keep in touch. They, you know, we just sort of take turns being each other's mentors. So it's been a good gig. I've had a lot of talented students, and you know, I actually love teaching. I love teaching the undergraduates because everything is like new and fresh, and oh yeah, let's do it. You know, graduate students are a little bit more measured, but they're, you know, eventually we get to the like, oh, okay, and we're gonna have chocolate too, right?
We understand what's really important here.
Do bring chocolate to the class.
Yes, indeed. So tell me a little bit, say Maria, what do you think has been the role of poetry in the African American community, and what will it be going forward?
Poetry has been a large part of who we are as a people. It has always been there from, you know, the first human experiences. All of us are of African descent, every last one of us. From being the way that stories are told, the way that history was told. My husband's from Senegal in West Africa, and they have griots there, and the griot is the one that is the keeper of the stories. They know all the family histories. You don't need ancestry.com. You just, they know it all, and they share it in the form of poetry and music. So poetry's always been a part of us. And then as we move forward through the different movements, I can think of poets from the Abolitionist Movement, such as Few Harper, who wrote The Slave Mother, just a beautiful picture of the slave auction to let people bring awareness to slavery, to the pain of slavery. And then we could move forward to civil rights and Black power, and how you had so many wonderful poets just speaking out about the struggle people are going through, about loving yourself and having pride in yourself, and also about continuing the fight against. And then today, so many artists. There's one of my favorite books is of poetry and protest. And it has use of Komonyaka and Patricia Smith and Tracy K. Smith, like all these wonderful poets sharing their reality and their feelings about police brutality in America. And I write about that as well. So I feel like poetry has been the voice of the voice of my people for centuries.
Thank you.
And that's
And you, Marilyn, how do you feel about poetry in the Jewish community back then and now and going into the future?
I you know, think I wanted to tell you that I was in New York in Lower Manhattan on 9/11. I was on a plane waiting to take off at LaGuardia when the first plane hit, and we were sort of thrown out of the airport, standing on the road there, and then I was also in Paris in 2015 during the terrorist attacks there. I have friends who won't travel with me, by the way.
I can imagine.
What I'm wanting to say is that poetry has been my companion in times of crisis. You know, and I'm not talking about little things, although the poems are good for those too, but for these big blows where you're standing out in the middle, you know, at the side of a highway wondering how you're going to get home, the poetry helped me. It helped me then. And, you know, it helped when the COVID crisis first started. I heard Yo-Yo Ma on PBS. He was doing a song of comfort every day, and he suggested that we all do the same. So for the first 60 days of the crisis, I wrote a comfort song every day.
Wow.
And it helped enormously, you know. So, you know, I'm thinking not specifically about being Jewish, although we are people of the word and we love books. I mean, look behind you, Deborah. You have no shortage, okay? I won't worry about your book supply. But poetry is always, the word has always been our ally, and poetry too. There you see. Now you're just showing off, Deborah.
Yes, yes. I have a picture of myself
Yes.
in diapers with a number 2 pencil.
Oh my gosh.
Out of paper, smiling into the camera, you know. We're going to be writing here, folks. And it just kept going. I think we in the Jewish community have found a great deal of comfort, but also of purpose in reading and writing, and poetry is key among them. And I can recall at my father's funeral, and they asked me to say something. What did I do? I read a poem. I read one of the poems that I had read to him on his deathbed because it made him smile.
That's wonderful.
And
tell us again his name, please.
His name was Aaron, Aaron.
Yeah.
Levine, Levine. And he was a U.S. military intelligence officer during World War II, assigned to interrogate Nazi prisoners of war.
Oh my gosh. Whoa.
So poetry was always with him.
So lovely. It's just wonderful.
It was something that he was passionate about, and he had books all over the house. And you know, we pass that love and passion on to the next generation.
We do.
And so my daughter, who is now a doctor, you know, I found that she was able to, as a teenager, read in the shower. You just gotta. And so we are very fortunate in many ways to have these books, to be able to read, to the poetry and the rhythm of poetry embedded in us.
Yeah.
And maybe at this point, each of you might like to read one of your poems for our audience. Marilyn, why don't you go ahead?
Want me to start? Okay. This is The New York Grandma Disputes Marcus Aurelius. Nothing lasts forever or even for very long, Marcus Aurelius opined. Oi, you didn't know your Uncle Harry, Grandma said. His stories were snoozers, and he passed gas at the table. Marcus, are you nuts? Didn't know Cossacks. How long we hid, no joke. Marcus the bilious never got packed into steerage for Ellis. But you got here, Grandma. Look at the bright side. Oi, Grandma said, it was dark for a very long time. Aurelius was a Schlemielius. Ask your Uncle Nat how long steel bars lasted in Sing Sing. Ask the East River how long it took to sink his guns and the ones riddled down. Stop it, Grandma. We need hope. Oi, hope. The cockroaches on Coney Island had hope. Ask my guitar on top of the hall closet how long it waited. Sometimes I play when no one hears. I strum Yiddish songs and my heart rejoins the beat. Secrets are long. Music echoes over steppies, over pogroms. And love? I am still holding my baby daughter, my sons, and the mothballs from my secondhand store are staving off hungry enemies, keeping your little wool coat safe, in case by some miracle there's a great grandbaby and another moving day.
Oh, I love it. When did you write that?
Oh, recently.
Oh, I love it.
Thank you.
That's cute.
I hear my father's mother, the Brooklyn grandma, I hear her voice. Aye.
Of course. By the way, I was born in Brooklyn.
See?
Even though I was brought up in Bermuda, I was born in Brooklyn.
We guess it's small world.
Yeah.
That's a hike from Brooklyn to Bermuda.
Yeah, it was. It was. When the one side of the family came over from Eastern Europe, Ukraine, whatnot, to America through Ellis Island, they came down the southern coast and then over to Bermuda, and we are still the only Jewish family to have lived on the island for 4 generations, and it's an interesting experience being the only Jewish little girl on the entire island. Yeah.
Wow, that is interesting.
So it's always something that people look at and then say, well, you represent, do this, do that, do this. So it's a responsibility, but also a joy, right, to represent. And I suspect, Maria, you know that very well.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, being the only one is very common in my personal history. And I remember the first time, it was 3rd grade, and the teacher was teaching about slavery, and I was like, please don't, please don't, please don't. But inevitably, little Tyler raised his hand, and I'm like, oh. And the teacher called on Tyler, and he said, so you're saying I could own Maria and she'd have to do everything I tell her to do? I'm like, I knew it.
Oops.
And it was just repeated questions of, so I could tell Maria to do blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, this is not about me. I'm 8. It was like the 80s. Let's not do this.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So it's hard to be like the representative.
Oh dear. Well, I'm sure that is somewhere in your poetry that comes out. Why don't you share your poem with us now?
Okay. This one is recent. It's called Terra Rocks, and it's going to be in Cutthroat Journal of the Arts in the summer. So let me spread this out so I can see. Okay. Terra rocks, moans, sheds breath heavy as her belly, battered by birth pains, her brings no relief from contractions 4 centuries apart, getting closer. The squeeze steals, resolves, rests, erupts again. It comes in waves, the tearing tsunami of pain. Super spreaders in corona-colored hats, dark faces threaten blue just by existing. Karen Amy Cooper's a stranger, and he is shot before her latte cools.
Oh.
Boogaloo bullies paint peaceful protesters into corners, distract, destroy, dilute the message. They call them terrorists for repeating his last words. I can't, he, whoo, whoo. The pains return. Breathe, Tara, breathe. Down low, Mother Earth dilates like flesh, like water the bow breaks. Critical thinkers hear the cry, stay home, protect one another. Children hang rainbows in windows again, tie teddy bears to trees as wine glasses sing us to sleep. We hobby, we bake, some are long haulers, some even survive. But I, one of the vulnerable ones, cradle my breath in African cloth so my face can protest from a distance with my mouth safely closed.
Whoa.
Wow. Yes. Thank you. My goodness.
Powerful.
And that's going to be coming out soon, huh?
Yeah, Cutthroat Journal of the Arts in their summer issue.
Oh, wow.
So I should have said Terra, Terra, at first before I read.
It's beautiful. Both of you are just such gems. It's,
Thank you.
oh gosh, I wish I could write poetry like you guys, but it ain't gonna happen.
Well, you should come to Ovilar with us.
I knew that was coming.
I love it. I love it. How did you choose France?
The Virginia Center for the Creative Arts was given some property there, and they built a studio. I went there as an individual, as a just to write myself. And I said, well, what if I taught a workshop here? And they were like, oh, why don't you try that? And it's worked out very nicely. Right now they're doing a residency, so it's a lot cheaper for the writers to come, which is a good thing. And yeah, but it's it's basically the same thing. And I love it. The villagers treat me like I'm a family member, and so and my French has improved.
I love it. Oh, I am so honored, ladies, to have the two of you on this podcast, and together, no less. What a wonderful experience. And I know that our audience is going to enjoy this tremendously and get so much from it. You are teachers by nature, just by the stories you tell, the poetry, everything. It doesn't have to be in a formal classroom, does it?
No.
Thank you for opening the door for us to do this. It's lovely.
Oh, always. Is there anything else you'd like to add, either one of you, to what we've talked about today?
Well, just that it's wonderful to be able to have the dialogue, and I hope we can continue it. So I'm thanking you again, and let us know more about what you're doing, and how we can find your work.
Oh, certainly. I would love to share with you some of what I've done, and it's especially the memoirs, which are a little closer to creative writing, rather than how-to books.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I'll do is, in thanking both of you, I may send you as a gift the ebooks of those memoirs. So
Lovely. Thank
see
you.
them and we can talk, because writers have a very special connection, do they not?
We do indeed. Yeah. And sisterhood too.
Pardon?
Sisterhood.
Yes, indeed. we know a lot of stuff as women. Maria, did you want to add anything?
I'm just really happy to be here, and learning about you and your father and your program and everything has been wonderful. And seeing Marilyn again and hearing your voice is wonderful.
Sweetie, same here.
So and thanks for the opportunity to read my poetry on your program.
Oh, my pleasure. We'll have to do this again. All right, we will plan it maybe later in the year, but this has just been wonderful. And thank you so much, ladies, and thank you, audience, for joining us. We welcome your comments when you get the American Diversity Report page for this recording, which will be very soon, very soon.
Excellent. Outstanding.
So we'll speak again, and thanks for everything you do.
Thank you. Take care, Maria. Keep that family safe.
I will. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.